Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Dean Miller, President and CEO of PACT.
All right, welcome back. We hit the halfway point, now we're ready for our keynote address. Thank you again all for your participation and involvement here today. It's been a great day so far. We've got a beautiful day. See some people taking advantage of the balcony outside. Be a good spot for drinks later on. Hint, hint, get there early. Again, want to thank Anexanet for sponsoring lunch, as well as the food and beverage throughout the day. Thank you to them. And again, just a reminder, we got demo pits going on again this afternoon. All of our showcase sponsors lining the halls outside. Please hit them on your break. Last but not least, after his keynote, Geoffrey Moore will once again be signing books at 2 o'clock out in the showcase area. If you didn't get a book, go to registration. You should have a tag within your name tag that has that. If you don't, I think we'll have a couple of extras as well. All right, I want to recognize and thank Liquid Hub and introduce a partner with Liquid Hub and the head of their commercial operation, Hank Sumi. Hank is certainly known to this community as a leader in the technology area, and Liquid Hub is as well. They've been a close partner of PACT's. Jonathan Brassington, the CEO, is past chairman of PACT. Please join me in welcoming Hank.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Dean mentioned, I'm with Liquid Hub, where we really focus on doing one thing, helping our customers engage with the people that matter the most to them. If you want to learn more, grab me this afternoon. I'll be around and we can talk about that. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Geoffrey Moore, who's an author and speaker and advisor, best known for his first book, Crossing the Chasm. And over the last 25 years, he has established himself as one of the most influential high-tech advisors in the world, once prompting Conan O'Brien to ask, who is Geoffrey Moore and why is he more famous than me? Here he is to speak to you today about his latest book, Zone to Win.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. So Liquid Hub, the people that matter most to me, engaging with them. So Marie and I have been married for 48 years. Do you have a marital thing that you can? Okay, let's work on it. Okay, good. Well, listen, it's a privilege to be here. I'm a frameworks guy, so what I try to do is find really interesting problems that people are routinely mishandling, and then kind of staple myself to the problem and see if we can't figure out eventually how you could do it better. Crossing the Chasm was that kind of a book. Every one of the books actually I've been involved with has been that kind of a book. The book that we're talking about right now is called Zone to Win, and I'd actually thank you very much. Zone to Win. So the problem that this was stapled to is actually the Crossing the Chasm problem from the point of view of an established enterprise. So same problem, and the Crossing the Chasm playbook kind of lays out a way to solve for that problem. It turns out that that way works extremely well for startups who are venture funded. But because venture capital is oriented toward that journey. But public enterprises are not oriented toward that journey. And what startups have a lot of problems to solve, but they aren't conflicted. Everybody in the startup ecosystem is very clear about where we're going. That's not the case in the established enterprise. So the challenge is called catching the next wave. And what it does, if you think about it, when you get to the next marginal dollar in an established enterprise, should I put it into a going concern that may be losing altitude but still makes a lot of money? Or should I put it into the new thing, which is clearly the hot new thing, but by the way, that dollar evaporates upon contact, right? And so, the first few dollars is kind of easy, but all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what are we doing here? So that creates a crisis of prioritization. And the zone management framework is simply designed to say, how can the management team and the board of directors and an established enterprise have a principled conversation about this that leads to an outcome that they all want to buy into. So that's what this is intended to do. It helps people reset priorities, and you can use it in the context of either being aggressively attacking a disruptive innovation. You can use it to defend yourself against a disruptive innovation, or you can use it at a time when your industry is not being disrupted. And I'll kind of show all three of those at the end. But just one slide on disruptive innovations. So this is the kind of phrase that Silicon Valley dines out on for about a decade. So disruptive innovation is kind of like mayonnaise. If you put it on everything, it'll be good. And so as a result, it loses meaning. I mean, the phrase just has virtually no semantic content after about 3 years. So I think the orange thing is important. The orange subtitle says, a disruptive innovation becomes significant when it drives the marginal cost of something that used to be expensive and require scarce expertise to virtual ubiquity and virtually zero. So let me give you some senses about what's happening in our world right now is we have a bunch of innovations that are stacking up on each other that are doing this. So just to kind of go back to my phone, let's start with cloud computing. Basically, cloud computing makes deploying software anywhere in the world free. Now, it's not exactly free, but Aaron Levy can start Box in his dorm room in 2007 at USC with a MasterCharge card. And to start that company 10 years prior would have probably cost $5 to $7 million. So basically, it's virtually free, which means if you can deploy software to do something, you should, because it's free. Okay? Now, what's interesting about that is it's free if you're just starting. It's not free if you're an established enterprise. If you're an established enterprise, you already have a data center. You have SAP, or you have Oracle, you have whatever you have. You have a complete staff. You've got the big stack. You've got to run that stuff 24/7, 30. Now you're going to add cloud. Okay, nice, but by the way, that's another stack, another set of protocols, another set of issues, with another set of security concerns. Oh, and then we want to bridge the two, okay? And all of a sudden you realize where the established enterprise is going, hang on, why do I want to do cloud again? Okay, because for me it's not free. The next one is mobile computing, smartphones. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion smartphones out there right now. You can communicate with 1.5 billion people across the globe for free. And we're pretty damn close to free now, right? You don't pay for their phone, you don't pay for the internet, and you don't pay for their cell phone subscription. Is anybody's business model set up to communicate interactively 24/7 with 1.5 billion people? Well, of course not. Because that's, we had Siebel Systems, for God's sake, and we have call centers in Cincinnati. We have a completely different infrastructure, on a completely different basis. But if you're a startup, you go, yeah. In fact, if you look at those two just alone, you say, okay, well, that's why Uber and Airbnb could just kind of clear the table in like record time, right? Record time. Because basically they started with the assumption that both of those were free. Okay? Now, big data isn't quite free yet, but again, we are approaching free. And we had some interesting discussions before lunch on the team that was doing Aware, talking about big data. You have to understand, first of all, when data storage was expensive, you did everything you could to reduce data. Then there was a period where the disk drives were getting cheaper, but you still didn't have a lot of big data in corporations because of something called ETL. So ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. And what it means is, if you're going to analyze structured data in any corporation, you have to take it out of the operational systems, the ERPs, the CRMs, whatever it is. You had to then munge it, which is a technical term, and put it into a columnar database or some very analytically oriented database, Netezza, Teradata, Sybase IQ, that sort of thing. And it worked, but it was error prone, it was expensive, and it was slow. So two things have happened that changed that. Big data now is, and what made that hard is you had to structure the data when you wrote it. That's why they had to extract it, transform it, and then load it. The new big data is schema on read. What that means is you don't structure the data, you just throw it in a big Hadoop pile, okay? Or you apply Splunk to it, and you decide what format you want when you're reading it, and you explore it for formatic properties. Now, when human beings do this, we're very good pattern recognizers, we're sort of good at it. But machine learning, the little guy that learned how to play breakout, who was such a terrible breakout player, at the first hour, and at the end of the day could basically defeated the game, because basically if you can apply an infinite number of cycles, this is the infinite number of monkey problem, and virtually with infinite compute and infinite storage and no schema except when you read, you can eventually now apply machine learning in ways you never could before. And that gets to the fourth guy in our thing, which is machine learning. So again, it's not free yet, but wherever it has showed up, once it becomes operational, it's effectively free. And where machine learning has showed up with big data, it has simply eviscerated the competition. So you've been Amazoned, you've been Ubered, you've been Airbnb'd, you're SOL. I mean, right? And then what you realize about machine learning is it always starts dumber than dirt, but it never gets more stupid. It always gets more smart. And so eventually, Deep Blue does beat Garry Kasparov, and the AlphaGo does beat the Go guy. And Watson does win Jeopardy, although that's a different framework. So with machine learning, what you realize is, again, and this is not maybe 2017, but and maybe in your industry later or sooner, but you can sort of see there's going to come a time where basically you can optimize any digital system, and at the margin, it's going to be free. And if you put a sensor onto any object in the world, you just made it digital, including yourself. Your Fitbit, your heart monitor, your whatever. So basically, you can optimize any physical system. So this really is a remarkable sort of concatenations of disruption, and it is fundamentally changing the economy in ways, just as we went from agriculture to industrial, there's a mega shift underway to go from industrial to digital. It's not happening tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. But that's where this is going because of all of those issues. So you say, okay, when the marginal cost of anything approaches zero, what do we see? Well, what we're seeing right now is at the bottom of this thing, we're seeing the money that we put into systems of record when we were in the 90s, when we were doing SAP and Oracle and PeopleSoft and Siebel and all those guys, has now, we're maintaining those systems, but nobody's spending the extra dollar there anymore. They're spending on what we call systems of engagement. And part of that is because we solved a supply chain problem in the 1990s when supply was the scarce ingredient. It worked so well, bringing on India, bringing on China, bringing on a global economy, that now supply is not the scarce ingredient. The customer demands the scarce ingredient, and so systems of engagement is to the demand chain what systems of record is to the supply chain. And so we're spending a ton of money on systems of engagement because the customer is the scarce ingredient in all of our business models. Great. So we're going forward with that. So far, that seems like, well, okay, seems like IT as we knew it. But what we didn't anticipate was that every single system of engagement, regardless of whether it's an IoT thing or a cell phone or whatever it is, writes a log. It creates a log file. And that log file is what is feeding the systems of intelligence. And the system of intelligence is only as smart as the amount of data it can eat, which means the number one competitive advantage position in the world today is Google, and then Facebook is number 2, and Amazon is number 3, because they just eat an enormous amount of data because we give it to them voluntarily every single day around the planet. And when you look at a model like Apple, Apple's actually at risk here. Apple does not get a data feed that is comparable to those 3 feeds. So you're going to watch those 3 companies becoming more and more powerful as their systems of intelligence become bigger and bigger and bigger. If you look at Microsoft's recent strategy, Microsoft said, look, we have already the Office Exchange data. Now, how much of that we can use to build a graph of your work, we have to agree with that as a customer. But they also bought Bing, which is the world's 2nd biggest search engine, but still a huge amount of data feeding that. And then they just bought LinkedIn. So now they have 3 sources of data to feed their machine learning beast. So this is what's going on. Systems of engagement, creating log files, which are then being digested by systems of intelligence. And that's creating the new economic opportunity going forward. So what does this mean for everybody in the room? Well, here's the drill. When disruption changes the design rule, when the marginal cost of something in your industry goes to 0, you have to change your design rules. You cannot compete against somebody who gets for free something that you spend a lot of money to do. So prior to this, you can do it voluntarily, but now you're under duress. And what we're seeing in our economy right now is industry after industry after industry, not all of them, under duress. And they're having to respond. So what do? Well, we could take a lot of encouragement from tech, because obviously tech is great at catching the next wave. So if you start reading this from the bottom up, So start from the bottom and kind of read line by line. When you get to the row where you do not recognize the names, that's when you entered the industry. Okay? Now, there are some of us in this room that can go all the way to the top of this chart, right? Okay. Now, here's the point about this list. These were not the losers. These were the winners. These companies dominated their category first time out. They crushed it their first time out. So why weren't they able to do it the second time? So that was the problem. And by the way, Clay Christensen sort of stated this problem in 1995 with a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, which I think it's a different approach, but it's very much in the same genre. How does an established enterprise kind of catch the next wave? How does it deal with disruption? He then wrote a book called The Innovator's Solution. If that had worked, I would not have had to ride Zone to Win. So I love Clay, by the way. Innovator's Dilemma, yes, no, not Innovator's Solution. So what's the problem? So I actually think the best framework for this problem is one that some people at McKinsey came up with, maybe 20 years ago. Merdad Begay and a few guys down in Australia. And it's just a very simple framework. And you want to think about this during your annual budgeting process. And you're going to allocate resources once a year, classically in an enterprise. And the question is, when are you going to get a payback from that investment? When's the ROI horizon? And these are 3 ROI horizons. So the first horizon says, I'm going to give you some money this year, and you're going to give me back more by the end of the year. Okay? And that, needless to say, all 54 of the companies on the prior slide did just fine with that, really right up to the end, right up to the end. I mean, basically, during this, somebody says, I want you to give me a boatload of money, but I'm going to give you a boatload of money plus 7% or 10% or whatever it is I'm going to give you by the end of the year. More salespeople, I'll give you more revenue. More engineers, I'll give you more product, et cetera. Not the problem horizon. I thought for a while the problem horizon was horizon 3. So one of the book's problems I tried to staple myself to was what's going on with innovation in large corporations, because I thought, well, large corporations can't innovate. That turns out technically to be BS. Okay? It's just not true. Large corporations innovate like crazy, and they do great jobs of it. I mean, IBM Labs, HP Labs, the Nokia Labs, Xerox PARC, for God's sake, sort of started Silicon Valley, right? I mean, Apple didn't invent the mouse, Xerox invented the mouse. Okay? So actually, it was not a problem. All 54 of those companies had many, many shots on goal that were really, really, really cool technology, and that ultimately did find it to market through other venues. And the problem, the reason why Horizon 2 is not that big of a problem is if the contract in Horizon 1 is give me a boatload of money, but I'll give you a boatload plus 10% in a year. In Horizon 3, you say, I want you to give me some money. I have no idea if you're going to get it back. I may never return a cent of it. So don't give me very much money. Okay? But whatever you give me, I want to experiment with. Okay? So that you say, okay, we're a rich company. We have cash flow. We can put some money into exploration, R&D. Sounds good. But the Horizon 2 contract is the killer. So the Horizon 2 contract goes something like this. We have found a really exciting opportunity. We want to scale it. This is the next big thing. I need a pretty big bucket of money. I'm not giving any of it back. Okay? Next year, I'm going to need a really big bucket of money. I'm not giving any of that back either. Okay? The third year, I need a boku basket of money, and if we crush it, we're going to break even. What do you say? And yes, exactly. That's kind of what happened. So basically, the net of that thing, if you sort of play that out in a public company, and you realize there's no venture capital here, right? All the money you're spending is basically money coming out of your own cash flow or retained earnings. What you realize is if you sort of want to come up with sort of the sort of payoff line, it's to catch an S curve, which is what this is all about, you have to go through a J curve. Okay? That's just the drill. So that's the J curve. And if you sort of say, okay, well, let's look at this business between the startup community and the established enterprise, who's up for this J curve? Are venture capital investors up for this J curve? You bet they are. Limited partners give money to venture firms to invest in J curves. The general partners interview CEOs to find the biggest honking J curves they can find. Okay? And then if you go to work in a startup, you know damn well your job is to run as fast as you can through that red zone to get to the blue zone. That's the job. Okay? How about public investors? Thank you for playing, right? No, you're a financial instrument in my portfolio, right? You are an earnings engine. You are not a venture. And if I want to invest in venture capital, I'll invest in venture capital. Okay? So no, don't do this. Okay? How about the startup sales team? Do you want to sell the new thing? Well, it's all I got to sell, right? And by the way, it's cool and it's exciting, and I'm young, and I get to meet interesting people, and if I've got stock in the company. This is great. So you work for an established enterprise. I want to go to club. Every salesperson I've ever met, their sole motivation in any given year is to go to club, right? So how do you get to club? Well, you got to make a number. Well, so how do you make the number? Well, I can sell the old stuff to people who already know me and have budget for it, and the only issue is can I get a decent price for it, which they're going to hammer me on, but I'll just give more away until I make whatever number I need to make. Or I can go sell the new thing, which demos like crazy, but unfortunately, there's no budget for it because the category hasn't even arrived at budget. And I have to sell 7 different people. And if I win, I get to do a proof of concept and a pilot. And maybe in 2 years, I'll get the big payoff. So no, what I'll do instead is I'll demo the cool thing so that people will come. And then I'll sell them all the old stuff, right? Okay. How about customers? Early adopters? Yes. We want to be on the cutting edge. Yes. The bleeding edge, leading edge. Yes. Pragmatic customers? No. This thing doesn't work yet. Not at scale. Who are your references? Show it to me in production. This is the whole cat crossing the chasm problem, right? So no, I would like you to come and I think it's fascinating. I think you need to demo it to another group in my organization. I'm actually sending someone to a seminar about your product, okay? So needless to say, not a lot of cash flow. The seminar business is actually pretty good, but nothing else, not very good. And then partners, how do partners feel? Well, it turns out second-tier partners, you can often find a smaller partner who says, you know what, I feel like hitching our company to this opportunity because if this is successful, this is going to take me to the sky. But a first-tier partner, I'm sorry, again, it's the same issue. There's still a bunch of SAP implementations over here, which we do in 8-figure contracts, or I can help you with your proof of concept, and so again. So the point about this exercise is, this is why startups routinely outperform the best established enterprises in their category. Just honest to God, venture-backed firms do not worry about established companies as their competitors. Because at the scale they're playing, at the speed they're playing, at the risks they're taking, they know damn well that those firms will not do it. Now, there's a new sort of velociraptor-like, kind of large enterprises that are out there now, which are scaring. People are scared of Amazon right now. Just at one time, we were scared of Microsoft, and at one time, we were scared of IBM. But eventually they become so established, the risk-reward equation doesn't work for them. And then you say, okay, well, great. Then they're not a competitor. I'm okay. So you look at that thing and say, okay, what's the problem statement formatically? It's Horizon 2. We thought Horizon 2 was actually simply a way station between Horizon 3 and Horizon 1. And by the way, it is for sustaining innovations. The next Intel microprocessor, the next release of Office, the next whatever, you spend a lot of money before you make money, but it's all the market. It's not disruptive. The market's all ready to absorb it when it gets there. In a disruptive innovation, it's not a funnel. It's an hourglass, which is interesting. So obviously, the public markets, every market's interested in Horizon 1. How you doing? But the public markets also are very excited by Horizon 3. If you ever read the CEO letter in the front of an annual report, it's always about Horizon 3, right? Horizon 1, we did very well this year. We struggled a little bit this year. Horizon 3, this is this bright future. And Horizon 2, it's like we don't talk about Horizon 2. Right? So it's like, I have earning adults. I have these cute grandchildren. And there's a couple of teenagers in the background. And the teenagers eat like adults, but they earn like grandchildren. So it's like, okay, right. So it's not good, it's not good, it's not good. Okay, so my point about this exercise is, if you look at this, it's just not a natural act. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, one other point. Let me make one other point first. This choke point, we thought it was R&D. That was the mistake I made when I went to write Dealing with Darwin. I thought it was an R&D problem. It's not an R&D problem. The engineers are not that expensive. What's expensive is the opportunity cost of diverting your go-to-market envelope away from a cash-generating machine into a cash-consuming machine. That's the choke point. So it's a go-to-market envelope problem. So more R&D, which is what we were throwing at this problem for 15 years, does not solve this problem because it doesn't solve the choke point problem. Okay? So the point here is just bringing a disruptive innovation to scale is not a natural act. It puts the organization in conflict with itself. It's more like an autoimmune disorder. Okay? And you're really, we used to talk about the corporate antibodies as if corporations were some kind of sick thing. Antibodies are a health mechanism, right? They're operating correctly when they identify something that is foreign to the system, and that's what was going on. And so you look, and then what happened was, we started dealing with this problem, but we dealt with it inauthentically, which is what the purpose of the rest of this framework is, to say, look, this is a real problem. I mean, you can apply as many frameworks as you want to it. The problem does not go away. But the problem is, could we deal with it authentically? Could we bring our best thinking and make our best series of bets? Because everybody kind of gets at the margin that if you never invest in anything that goes to Horizon 2, eventually when the design rules have caught up with you, you're out. I mean, that's sort of the Kodak moment idea. You're out, okay? If you invest in it every year, you're going to blow all your money and you're out. Okay, so we kind of know at the corners that there are two absurd behaviors, but trying to find something in the middle, we kept on missing it. We missed it year after year after year. That's why the 54 companies are on that list. So how would we operate differently? So what this model says is, if we're going to operate differently, you and your colleagues need to sit down. And by the way, any company that's large enough to have cash flow that runs your company, in other words, if you're running your company on existing earnings from an existing line of business, you qualify for this model, okay? The bigger you are, probably the more intense the pressure is. But even if you're a private company, if you're running on cash flow, you're going to have this problem. And here's what the model says. It says, okay, let's sort it out in two dimensions. On the right-hand side, we'll put the stuff that's established, and we'll call that sustaining innovation. On the left-hand side, we'll put the disruptive stuff. That's the cash-consuming new stuff. If you're above the line, you are earning money for this year. You're making a contribution this year. And we kind of set that line, not arbitrarily, I'll tell you why in a minute, but just in your mind for the moment, arbitrarily at 10%. So if you're generating 10% or more of the revenue of the enterprise, you should be above the line. And if you're not, you should be below the line. And when you kind of run this thing out, what you see is there's 4 different zones. And what I'm going to suggest with you is each zone is a totally legitimate set of interests. It has its own culture, its own metrics, probably, if you're a large enough company, its own building. Okay? I mean, these cultures actually don't get along. They don't interact with each other much. They interact with each other at arm's length. Let me show you. So the performance zone is the place where you sell what you make and make what you sell. So everybody in the performance zone has a number in their annual compensation plan. You're either going to make a bookings number as a salesperson, or you're going to make a revenue number as a line of business owner. Okay? If you're in one of those two orgs, you're in that zone. If you're not in the zone. Okay? So it's a very simple, it's a very Horizon 1 focus, and these cultures tend to be very competitive and commitment oriented. So you have weekly commit sales calls, right? And and you're on quota, and it's on spec, on time, on budget. Not which two do you want, right? I mean, it's execution-oriented cultures, right? So that's great. So that's called the performance zone. It's probably about a third to a little more. It's not quite half the budget. A little bit more than half the budget is the productivity zone. This is everybody else in your company. This is everybody else who doesn't have a number, but if they don't do their job, the whole thing doesn't work. So it's all of finance, all of HR, all of IT, legal, marketing, customer support, supply chain, procurement, logistics, transportation, safety, everything else. And basically, its job is to do all the work behind the scenes so that the performance zone can be successful. So it's a little bit like the line of, NFL. It's NFL, right. So we have the linemen, and then we have the backfield, right? So the backfield's sort of in the upper quadrant, and the linemen are in the lower quadrant. Their job is to make it all work. They are not a commit-oriented culture so much as a collaboration-oriented culture. These people tend to make the sacrifices necessary to make things work going forward. And between the two of those zones, You could have like 95% plus of your corporation's budget in those two zones. Interesting, my father worked for 40 years. He never had anything on the left-hand side of this diagram, ever. He was in art, he was in architecture, engineering, construction. There weren't any disruptive innovations in his era, right? So basically, he spent no money on the left. It was 100% on the right. But in an era of disruption, and those 5 clouds more and more, it's virtually impossible now to suggest we can ignore disruptive innovation. We don't have to invest at all. So that gets us to the incubation zone. So the incubation zone is where you say, okay, I need to create options for the next wave. I don't need to actually get on it yet, but I need to get my fingers dirty. I need to learn about it. I need to experiment with it. I need to start taking a position relative to it. And that's not a competition culture. There's no number you're going to make. You don't have like number of patents signed. It's a classic performance zone metric applied to the incubation zone. It's a dumb metric, okay? What you want to think about instead is are you creating interesting options for the transformation zone in your incubation zone? Are you positioning to get on the next wave? And it's a creativity culture, meaning it tends to self-organize, it tends to work in small groups, it tends to organize around rock stars. It's not a line organization. It doesn't have process. There's no such thing as an incubation process. If you're a Canadian, you say process. I was just in Toronto. But the point is, I mean, yes, there is for the funnel. There is for that funnel on the left-hand side, but there's no process for getting through Horizon 2, okay? That's not how it works. The point about those 3 cultures is, virtually all large companies generate all 3 of those cultures. Interestingly, each culture feels slightly superior to the other 2. If you talk to somebody from the incubation zone, they're pretty sure they have 10 to 15 IQ points on you. I mean, you guys are really nice. You probably should intermarry, but leave the future to us, right, kind of thing. And if you talk to anybody in the performance zone, they will remind you yet again, we're paying for all this. We're the only people here who make any money at all. The fact that you're in this building is because of the performance zone, right? And if you're in the productivity zone, they're just looking at each other. Are we the only adults in the room? I mean, So yeah. Okay. So it's a very familiar pattern. It's a very familiar pattern. And the point about that pattern is it's stable. It's a stable pattern. You can run your company year after year after year, putting maybe 40 to 42% in the upper one, 49 to 50 something percent in the lower one, 2 to 4% in the one on the lower left, as long as there's nothing in the transformation zone. So what is the transformation zone? The transformation zone is the Horizon 2 vehicle. This is the place you go to say, we are going to reallocate assets in some dramatically asymmetrical way, which in the short term will take us through a J-curve, which means all of our external metrics will make us look dumber than dirt, okay? And we're going to catch the next wave, okay? We're going to do that. And to do that, you need a command culture. So you say, well, who's been successful at running these things? Largely tech founders that have 10 to 20 to 30% of the stock, okay? So Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Benioff, Bill Gates, Larry and Sergey, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Reed Hastings, okay? People who, and they're all, by the way, I don't know if you ever tried to spend a weekend with any of those people. I would just not suggest it, Puerto Vallarta's nice this time of year, but they're incredibly compelling, right? Steve Jobs, just, okay? Really, really compelling. And they're command cultures. I mean, basically, you just do not get in their way. But if you're not a founder and you don't own a whole bunch of things, you lead some kind of coalition of the willing. Now the challenge is a much tougher challenge. So we look at these 4 things. We say, okay, each zone gets a different priority at a different time. And the first problem we're trying to solve is, when we have a bucket of money, who gets first dibs? Okay? That's the first question you're trying to answer. Who gets first bite at the apple? It turns out it depends on where you are in terms of this notion of attacking, defending, or sustaining. So let's suppose it's a year where we're not being disrupted. Here's what it should look like. First dib, the performance zone, you idiots. Look, we're trying to make a bigger number next year than last year. Do we need more salespeople? Okay, get them more salespeople, right? You need more engineers to make product? More engineers to make product. We got to have enough stuff to make the number, okay? We got enough stuff? Great. What programs can we put in place in order to make these people more effective? And what systems can we invest in to make ourselves more efficient? And that's number 2. And we got a little bit of money left over? Great. Let's fund the incubation zone, test out some of these things. And you get an envelope that looks like that. Okay? And this is not a year when we're doing a transformation. Do you know what you call this year? A good year, right? This is a good year, right? Everybody in your ecosystem is aligned saying, this is exactly what we like to do. Okay? So you look at that and you say, well, why the hell would you do anything else, right? And there's the answer, it's one of 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is, hey, we found magic beans in the garden. We think with the right amount of fertilizer and water, this could make a beanstalk, and this could be game-changing, right? So what we want to do is take this thing out of the incubation zone, maybe with the help of 1 or more acquisitions. So we're going to, we've got some CapEx to add to the OpEx, and we're going to put it in the transformation zone. When you do that, you must make it the number 1 priority. This is what companies were not doing. Okay? Once you start a transformation, it's like starting an organ transplant. You must complete the operation. Okay? You cannot quit halfway. Okay? So basically that says, I need to make it the number 1 priority, which means, by the way, the number 2 priority becomes the performance zone. Now, this is the question that every one of those 54 CEOs answered wrong according to this framework, which is when the head of sales came to them and they was told about the reallocation of things or participated, it said, hang on, do you want me to make my number? And 54 CEOs said, you have to make your number, right? Turns out that's the wrong answer. And not only is it the wrong answer, it's dead wrong. What it says is if you start, heart transplant surgery, this is not the day to make your number. Okay? Once you start a transformation, you put your company in play. You put your reputation at risk. You put your ecosystem back on its heels. You're going to create your financial performance and make it look darker and darker. You must complete the transformation. By the way, if you miss your number, which you predictably will at some point in this journey, you'll get crushed. I mean, the stock market will not be your friend. But if you get through it and make your number, all will be forgiven. But if you get halfway through and quit, you just look like a chump. Okay? So the priority goes transformation 1, performance zone 2. So the correct answer is, of course, I want you to make your number. But the number 1 priority this year and probably for the next 2 years is we will complete this transformation, which means we will take this new business and until it is 10% or more of our total revenue, it is the number 1 priority in this company. And then productivity zone, God bless. And by the way, if you're in the incubation zone, sit down and just hope we don't chop your head off, right? Because the one thing we are not going to do is let you come out of the incubation zone. We are now under DEFCON 5 shutdown kind of stuff. So the deal there is you've got to enlist everyone in making this change, not just the division that's in the zone. If you have the cash cow division, your number 1 number is to make the transformation zone, or you don't get your bonus. So in other words, you'll see this in a line in a minute. You must get the entire team rowing in one direction. That's why startups are effective. They don't row in 2 directions. There may not be very many of them, but they're all rowing the same way. Large corporations spin because they're rowing in different directions, right? So this is a reward. So this is the last 5 years of the NASDAQ in kind of that orangey color. 2 great companies who, by the way, have been performing exceptionally well over the past 5 years, are actually underperforming the NASDAQ. Why? What do I have to do? And the answer is, well, you have to do something that wasn't priced into your model already. So right now, the reason they're flat is you did exactly what we thought you were going to do. By the way, way to go. Way to go. But your stock price hasn't budged. Why does Salesforce stock price budge? Well, in 2013, they acquire ExactTarget, which gives them for the first time an entry into the marketing cloud. They had Sales Cloud and Service Cloud. And it gets to 10% of revenue somewhere around 2015. And all of a sudden, what you realize is the only way large corporations can change their stock price sustainably is to add a new earnings engine to the model that the analysts are analyzing. So what they will do is they will go, okay, in addition to having Sales Cloud and Service Cloud and maybe this Force.com platform, we're going to add a 4th earnings engine to the Salesforce model. We'll run the numbers, and now we think the new discounted future value of the company looks more like that blue line. The reason why Apple at one point was the most valuable company in the world, which seems like a huge overstatement, was they added 3 net new earnings engine in a decade. And then people say, well, Apple can't innovate anymore. Well, shit, I mean, of course, right. They had 3 babies in 3 months, and you say, well, they're not fertile. You say, what the hell are you talking about? And by the way, none of them disrupted themselves. Okay, Apple never disrupted the Mac business, right? They disrupted other people's businesses going forward, but they added, obviously, the phone business, they had the music business, they had the tablet business. So if you want to change your stock price, you have to add a new earnings engine. And that's why people take the risk of trying to push that star into that upper quadrant, because frankly, it's a very painful journey. That's not the most common journey. In fact, I would say of the uses of this model in the clientele that I've been spending time with over the last 3 years, that's probably less than 20% of the cases. 80% or more are, I didn't start this fight, somebody picked a fight on me. I am Wyndham Hotels, and Airbnb came into my market. And I think I have an asset-light business, but Brian has no assets, right? He owns no homes, and he employs no property managers. That's not a fair fight, right? Uber, same thing, right? Travis, what a charming young man. Travis has no drivers, and he has no cars, okay? So the point is, when you're in an attack like that, your business gets under existential threat. This is the Microsoft case study of the book. Basically, all 3 of Microsoft's businesses 2007 are under existential threat. The back office software is going to be threatened by cloud. The Windows operating system is being threatened by the rise of mobile. And the Office ecosystem is being threatened by the diminishment of Windows. So all 3, and Google Apps. So all 3 are under existential threat. So what you do here is you say, okay, we're going to take one business at a time into the transformation zone, which means you're going to relax the performance commitments on that business for the time being and get it well. And the way you get it well is you reach into the incubation zone either through acquisition or through organic development, and you steal anything you can find that can help modernize your legacy business and get it back into the game again. Once you get it back into the game again, oh, by the way, and the performance zone comes in third, and you will definitely look ugly during this period because you're taking a cash earner out of the cash earning business in order to have it get well, okay? But what it makes this a little bit easier, investors see the existential threat too. So they say, okay, I see what you're doing. We did see what happened to Kodak. Okay, so we understand the Kodak example, and you apparently are trying to unkodak, okay? So you'll get much more slack for this one than for the other one. This does not require a founder. Lou Gerstner does this at IBM, right? He wasn't the founder of IBM. Okay? So basically, you can do this, okay? Now the game here again, though, is you got to get everybody on this page because the faster you get well, the faster you can put that business back into the performance zone and get it back. So what has happened at Microsoft since 2007? The back office business goes dark. They start building the Azure cloud. The margins on it are just grim to grisly, but they get better every year. Azure is now back in the saddle. It's the number 2 cloud. Amazon is clearly the number 1 cloud, but they're the number 2 cloud. CIOs kind of like them. Stockholders say, you know what? That's a real business. Then Office was stuck on-prem. Okay, no, Office 365 in the cloud. This is looking better. Most people are saying, yeah, Office in the cloud. Yeah, we'll go with it. So basically what you're looking like now is this is Microsoft. So remember, blue line is Salesforce. Red and blue at the bottom are Oracle and SAP. Orange line is NASDAQ. The prize for playing what we call zone defense, getting your game back in the game, is you get to keep your stock price. Okay? You get to go, in other words, the world has said you are keeping up with the industry. You have a reasonable path. You're not the leader, but you have a reasonable path forward, and you have all your legacy inertia is now an advantage. It's no longer a disadvantage because it's on the path going forward. So just to kind of bring this to a close, we've got a few minutes here. This is the kind of the thing that we didn't, I think, the companies made a mistake. They were tech companies. They thought J-curves, we do J-curves. That's what we do for a living, right? It turns out not in an established enterprise. Once you start a transformation, you cannot stop. It has to trump every other commitment, which means, by the way, I spend a bunch of time with clients saying, you know, guys, I don't think you should do this. I don't think you have built a coalition of the willing. I'm not sure your board's behind it. I'm not sure you guys are that behind it. You know what, there are other, I'll show you the last slide. There are other ways to skin a cat besides a transformation, and so don't start one if you're not going to finish it. So making the H1 number is important, but not the top priority, and here's what it takes. The CEO, and only the CEO, must take command. Because the CEO is the only person who can tell everybody else in the company, you must make this your number one priority. I don't care what your job is. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing I want you to think about is, how do I accelerate the transformation in the transformation zone? If you cannot answer that question with any particular action item, go to your day job, okay? But that's the number one priority. Then there's a new narrative for investors. You got to tell a story because your investors are going, what's going on here? They think you're, because all you really report out is Horizon 1. You can't really report out on this stuff until it's 10% or more, growing better. And you need to get everybody's comp tied to the game. Everybody's got to be in the same boat. You can't have outliers saying, well, good luck with that. I'm going to continue to work on my part of the business. So the milestones that matter, and this is a bunch of stuff from the book, if you're adding a new earnings engine, you will get credit for it in a new revised financial model as it approaches 10% with a trajectory that's going to get it to 15% of your total enterprise revenue. Under that figure, you will not get credit for it. So Microsoft, at the beginning of this thing, had a $4 billion Xbox business that had no role in its valuation because it's an $80 billion company. And it's Windows, Office, and back office software or Azure. So it's got to get to 10% to be meaningful. If it's zone defense, all you have to do is stop declining. You just have to get back on a positive curve with the industry saying, okay, you're not growing at double digits, you're not a rock star, but you know what? You've got a real business and it's got a real future. Massive stress on go-to-market resources to do it. Remember, it's not the engineering, it's the go-to-market, which means you can only do one. That's the other place where the 54 companies said, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Makes total sense. Need a new cliche. New cliche is chickens lay eggs one at a time. Okay? If a chicken tries to lay 2 eggs at the same time, it's bad for the eggs and it's bad for the chicken, right? So one at a time. So if you look at this thing, you say, what are the faults and fixes? The number one fault for most of those companies is we did more than one at a time. What are the odds? I mean, look, you're stressing the hell out of your sales force and marketing force and service force with one of these, so now you're going to do 2? So rule, never commit to 2 J-curves at the same time, period. Not allowed. Okay? Second one, a lot of these companies they started the first year, and by the first year of a J-curve isn't that bad. The second year sucks, and the third year is when you pull the plug, right? Because it's grisly. So the point about this thing is you can't. So if you start, you must not back down, which means you should really think very, very hard about starting, right? And then the third thing is letting anybody anywhere in the corporation opt out. And this was rampant across all 54 of those companies. And the drill here is make the comp program, put everybody in alignment, and then you're still going to have to fire at least one executive and probably more. And these will be some of your best executives ever. People who frankly had a legitimate chance of being the CEO that you got. Because these people they just can't let go of what they've accomplished. They just can't, okay? And the problem is, okay, I understand, but you have to leave, and like Friday at 5 would be actually the latest I can imagine. Okay? Because if you leave them in place, you're giving permission to a huge chunk of your organization to row in a different direction. And they will, okay? So transformations are defining moments. They simply must succeed. So last 2 slides. So, okay, Jeff, I'm not sure we got the moxie this year. We got a new CEO. They just were hired. We just did an acquisition. We're going through some, we've had a big, whatever it is, right? The industry's in a downturn. Okay, so this is not the year that we're going to be able to do this. What do we do? Well, it turns out, here's the drill. You can take those cool disruptive innovations and, you can just spend them on yourself. You can just say, I'm going to apply cloud computing or mobile computing to make my field force more effective. I'm going to use Internet of Things just to make my service organization have to roll fewer trucks. Okay? I'll just run myself cheaper, faster, better. That will buy me time. I'm still going down. But I can take cost out faster than I can lose revenue. I can buy time. That's a very good outcome. You're giving yourself another year to play the game. The second opportunity is to say, I can take this technology, I won't start a new earnings engine, but I can modernize an existing engine. So, for example, I came here in a cab this morning, and it has this app called Curb in it, which is Uber spelled with different letters, right? So the point about the curb, or if you go from New York, it's Arrow, right? You download it to your app, you download it to your phone, you can call a cab, you can see the cab coming to you, you can pay them with your mobile, okay? It's the Uber operating model, but it's not the Uber business model. They still own the cabs, and they still hire the drivers, and they still buy medallions. But modernizing your operating model is a great way to buy additional time in life. In fact, many times the zone defense outcome at the end of the day is a modernized operating model of the same business model. And then there's the third thing, which is no, we are going to do the transformation because we do. We do want to become an all-digital business. We want to be the Uber of our category or the Airbnb of our category or whatever. Those are all three great outcomes, but you got to pick the one that fits your company best and your situation best. And so the last slide here says, and my wish for everybody in this room is, look, you got to invest in your incubation zone enough to get a sense of the optionality of the new technology in your context, in your industry and in your company and with your customers. So you really do need to run the experiments. And the key question you want to answer as the experiment begins to mature is, how am I going to get out of the incubation zone? And the point of this framework was, you can go to the right and just use this new technology inside your own operations to make them more cost effective. There's no J-curve. You got to go through a bunch of change management, but there's no J-curve. You can actually use it to attack your operating model, a lot more change management, but really no J-curve. Same ecosystem, same partners. Or you can say, nope, we're going to add a new earnings engine. And that is a J-curve, okay? So my only point about this thing, because of this thing about transformation feels like something you're supposed to do on Thursdays, transformations are the exception, they're not the rule. It's like, just think organ transplant. It's not like, it's Thursday, I think I need a new kidney, right? I mean, once is enough. And I would say, just as a kind of a standard, one transformation a decade in tech would make you world class, okay? Because most tech companies haven't done that. Okay? So that's what I wanted to share with you. So first of all, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate that. Thanks. Thank you. There's a thunderclap in about 3 minutes and 47 seconds. But if your crap detector went off, just like recently, or if you have, just raise your hand. I think we're not going to try to do iPads or anything. But if anybody would like to either challenge or make a comment or a question, lots of stuff. This is this classic thing about why you use these things, but nobody can see anything. Anybody? Bueller? Right there, Mr. Bueller's right here. Just shout it out. Shout it out.
In your example where we move things into the upper left quadrant,
Mm-hmm.
the R&D group in the bottom left quadrant basically work themselves out of the job.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. So in the incubation zone, every R&D group in there believes that they're the venture-backed startup that's going to be the change the world. That's why you do it. It's exciting. And in the star one, you are. You didn't work yourself out of a job. You're going to be the new rock stars in the performance zone. But in the zone defense one, you got robbed. Basically, you were making it for one thing, and you got robbed. But because the corporation said, I'm terribly sorry, but I have to modernize my existing business. That was not what you were here for, but we need it. Yeah. And you will have a morale problem around that, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. One over here, just shout it out. Go ahead. Or wait, we have a microphone.
So the 54 tech companies that failed, did they have the option of the 3 choices, or were they really limited to a transformation or die?
No, I think they had the option of all 3 choices. What they did, which was so painful, was they did multiple transformation efforts that failed. Some frequently concurrently failed. So basically, they just bled themselves to death. They were like Renaissance doctors that thought leeching was the way you got more healthy, and they bled to death. And by the way, it's a slow death, right? I mean, it took a long, long time for those companies to lose it, but they just got weaker and weaker every year. Yeah.
Right here?
Yeah, good, please, anybody.
Right here.
So,
Oh, hello.
how would you apply this for
You're next. Okay, go ahead.
for tech in government?
So tech in government. So the question is, how would you apply this for tech in government? So government's a mission-driven thing. It's not the same thing from a point of view of accounting, because you don't exactly make the number, But clearly there's a traditional asset allocation inertia that you're trying to overcome. And again, if you're the leader, the challenge there is it's not clear that the leader in government, when they turn the wheel, that anything actually turns in the middle. So it's a much harder play. But if you can create a coalition of the willing, you should be able to do it in government. One here and then one in the very back. And then we're done. One right here. The gentleman with his hand up in the very back.
Hi.
Hi.
What happens to the customers
Yeah,
who are
right.
part of that legacy zone, so to speak?
So it's not that the legacy zone goes away, but it is that, like, what's happened to the ERP business, right? So people are still paying maintenance, although they want to pay less and less and less. And they're paying more and more for maintain as opposed to transform. So I actually think, the customer in the legacy business still can be tended to, but it's the organization that does it is much more efficient, more process-oriented. It's interesting, they become more of a service organization, less of a sales-driven organization. But keeping a customer is a very profitable thing, and churn, which is the opposite, is a very painful thing. I don't think the customer is hurt here as much. I think the investors and the management team are the two people that get crushed. Yes?
Thank you. You had a great talk. I think you got it right.
I just make this stuff up.
I tend to live on the left side of your quadrants
Yes, okay,
as a
okay.
career. The people you mentioned in the middle of your presentation, you ripped off a bunch of names that you wouldn't want to spend the weekend with.
Yeah.
All had vision.
Yes.
All had courage.
Yes.
Sometimes weren't very nice.
Yes.
Very demanding.
Yes.
Of themselves and others. And so if these 54 companies actually got it, their leadership, because it really does start with visionary leadership, they'd have done it. And so can you comment on the nature of leadership and personalities and the courage to do the types of things you're talking about?
So my answer to that question, and this is probably one that we might want to have a cocktail over at some point, is that the kind of people we're talking about, the reference people, are 3 sigma variations on, they're almost mutations. And as a result, I think it is unrealistic and frankly unfair to expect any normal leadership team to produce anything vaguely like them. And so what I'm trying to do is play it for the bell curve. If you are one of those people, then you are, and by the way, many of these people flame out, of course, but they're miracles. But the fact that we only have 10 of them to talk about after 35 years is data, right? There's not, you cannot name 20 iconic leaders in tech, right? And we've had, I don't know, how many leaders? 4,000? A lot, okay? Anyway, thank you very much. I really enjoyed having a chance to talk to you. Thank you, thanks.